So this is something I've been intending to do for quite some time with Vincent, who's holding the camera here for me. Thank you, Vincent. And we've got the cemetery in the background, and we tried to match up historic photographs with current day photographs. And I can say I'm about maybe 90% sure that the surviving remnant of the aircraft wound up pretty much behind my back. That's the tail unit in which Eva Lily Linder was found, as per the interview I had with Tim Finlay. So pretty sure that this here behind me is the site of the tail unit, and beyond that the aircraft went over the crest of this hill and down into the next boundary, the ditch. Vincent Power, thank you very much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
In a very sunny Clonlohan graveyard, and we didn't think we'd get this type of weather today.
It's extraordinary. It feels so tranquil here. It's very, very peaceful and very tranquil, and with the beautiful sunshine, rare sunshine in November, it does feel quite surreal to be standing in the footsteps of where such a horrendous tragedy took place. That still, perhaps a lot of people, even the younger generation today, don't fully know exactly what occurred here in this graveyard. My compelling memory really is from my late dad, who at that stage he had quite a strong association with the airport, because he ran his own successful welding business in Limerick, and he became involved with the airport in 1961 when they were building that new runway. Now they had to use very specialised earth-moving equipment, which needed to be repaired. They needed somebody with quite a lot of expertise in the field who was able to repair those machines. And remember, at that stage, you know, such were the demands of building that runway. It was 24/7. The work was going through the night. Arc lighting had been assembled. My father was asked to carry out those repairs. He worked through he worked through the night under lighting to repair those machines. Now, at one stage, of course, he had been called out on that particular fateful day of this dreadful accident.
Just to interject, your dad would have been building runway 24, the modern jet runway.
Yes, the 1961. So again, I'm very, very lucky to have photographs of my dad, who wanted to give an idea of the scale and the size of this equipment, of these earth-moving machines. So he actually posed for a photograph in front of one of the tires. He looks like a little figurine, little dot in front of this enormous machine. But on that particular fateful day, just in the immediate aftermath of the accident, he had an appointment in Shannon Airport. He had a scheduled meeting to discuss some work they needed him to do, whatever. But of course, news of this catastrophe
starting to spread,
had spread immediately. So he diverted, and of course, in the daylight hours of the following morning, of course, many people had come out here. As you know, the area wasn't sealed off, which sounds quite unusual today to think that it hadn't been sealed off. Today it would be, of course, but it was pretty much an open field, as we can see behind us here. So he had come out. He's like yourself, Peter, a great interest in photography, and he assembled a tripod with his camera, a Yashica matte camera, which was like the old-fashioned box cameras at the time, but did the job quite well. He assembled with a tripod and he took photographs of the scene, which it's hard for us to imagine. We're really looking at photographs. I was, just a small tot at the time, so. But he kept those photographs over the years in his photo album, and it really sparked my imagination looking at those photographs as a small boy, because as a small boy growing up in Limerick, like a lot of people of my vintage, Shannon Airport was somewhere very, very special.
Absolutely.
And it was a time when, particularly on a Sunday, there weren't really many places to go, and you tended to go for what was called the Sunday spin.
That's it, yeah.
It sounds
for us.
crazy for the young kids, for my own kids today. But it was something. Well, Shannon, of course, was exciting for a small boy in the 60s, and being taken to that great viewing gallery in the airport, when security was a lot laxer, and you could step out onto that viewing gallery and literally a stone's throw from you see all the aircraft, which was fabulous for me. And it was, well, I suppose it symbolised, for a young boy growing up in Limerick at that stage, for me, it symbolised adventure, excitement, glamour. Even to walk around, my kids would be laughing at me today if they saw this, but even to walk around the terminal and look at the pilots in their sharp uniforms, the flight attendants, it was a different world. I mean, it was a pipe dream for me as a small boy to one day perhaps travel on one of these magnificent flying machines. As we grow older, then of course Shannon had many other reasons to be attractive to us, not just from the aviation point of view, but of course it symbolised glamour. That wonderful restaurant in Shannon, the Lindbergh Room, which people would have memories of, but top class. It was really the first true silver service restaurant we had in the region here, and to get a booking there, for a Sunday lunch to be taken by my parents was something special. But at any rate, my father had been out here. According to his retelling, he didn't speak at great detail about the more gruesome aspects of what he saw, because everybody who was in these fields did see gruesome sights, unfortunately. They did see mutilated, charred, dead bodies. I mean, this was, it was almost like the scene of a missile strike. What happened?
And the funny thing is that the further into the research I've been getting for this project, the funny thing is that the memory that lingers most with people down through the decades is smell, and the number of people who were first-hand witnesses here.
Well, that's what it was a scene of incineration. It was. I mean, it's unfortunate and regrettable to even talk about it, but that is the stark reality. And that night he witnessed that stark reality. And by his retelling, I understand he did help as much as he could, as well as taking photographs to record the scene. He did help, like a lot of people, in any assistance they could give. But of course, at that stage, the next day, of course, the deceased had been removed, the injured had been taken away to hospital. So it was really, he described it as, his great memory of it actually was just the smoke. It was still smouldering, the wreckage was still smouldering. And he always pointed out the fact that, which is visible in the photographs of course, that you've got the tail. It seemed to be the only, it's a very potent symbol, isn't it, of that disaster.
The tail and the undercarriage,
the tail and
the only parts that
were left.
You'd recognise as parts of the aircraft. I had a gentleman by the name of Jerry McMahon who kind of helped me enormously. He came out of the woodwork. He's from NSB, he's living in Dublin, and of the human stories that played out in that field over there that we're next to today. For me, for Alitalia, the saddest story was a family called Lisi, and it was a stepmother travelling back to the States with two sons, and she was the second wife of John Lisi, and he got a telegram in his place in New York to say that one member of his family was dead, and he flew right across the Atlantic on an Alitalia flight here to Shannon, not knowing which of the two lads had died. I mean, can you imagine
that's just that you can only visualise that and speculate on the heartbreak, the sheer heart. But I think we probably haven't heard, all the story. I mean, some of the stories obviously we are known, and you've discovered those. But I think it's probably many in what seems like, a prosaic, ordinary field in County Clare. That field we're looking at holds the most extraordinary human stories.
The agony of people is just
of suffering, of agony, and
a war zone. That's just the only way you could describe it.
I think in today's context, looking at conflicts in the Middle East and in the Gaza, which are dominating the news headlines these days, that's the only equivalence in that confined area of that, a force of an impact in a small confined area, what it can do.
And bear in mind that the aircraft was just airborne by 40 seconds, and she was full to the brim.
7,000 gallons of fuel.
7,000 gallons of avgas.
Yeah.
And just that alone, they just firebomb.
An explosion. I mean, it's important for me to be here today because over the years, I've seen those photographs my dad had. I've listened to his stories. In fact, the 2 air crashes he spoke most of all the air crashes in Shannon, were the Alitalia crash here, but also the other crash, President Airlines, but the one that he spoke most of was the KLM Super Constellation, the Triton, which went down into the estuary, into the mudflats. He spoke about that a lot, and it ignited my imagination, it fired my imagination a lot, and even to this day it still fires my imagination actually, because I cannot comprehend in the darkness of night, in all that chaos and confusion, that a passenger had the bravery and the gumption to leap into the water, point towards the twinkling lights of Shannon, and start swimming.
That was the navigator, Johan.
Johan Tiemann.
Johan
Tiemann. That Tiemann had the sheer courage to do that, not knowing if he would make it, and then of course becoming entangled along the way in marshes and in mud and in dirt, and then the seemingly inexplicable reasons why the airport never knew it had crashed in the first place. That site, exactly. I mean, as a small boy, and even now to this day, I can just visualise this man clambering up the riverbank, covered in mud.
Yeah, I look like the beast from the Dark Lagoon.
Like the beast from the Dark Lagoon, walking into the... Can you imagine it happening today? I mean, it wouldn't happen. Of course, it wouldn't happen today, but
can you imagine
it would never happen today.
The first people you meet are a bunch of Aer Lingus loaders, and they just have a laugh.
And this guy's, by the way, I've just swam from a crashed aircraft. I mean...
The boys go back to smoking their cigarettes and discussing the hurling, because there was the...
would they have taken him seriously at all? I mean, we don't know what the conversation was, but would they have even taken it seriously? But
luckily it was the Swiss Air crew that believed the story.
They believed the story.
And got things rolling.
Absolutely. So that's quite an extraordinary... So my dad really would have spoken a lot about that over the years, but more so, I would think, the Alitalia crash. From all the stories, and indeed your great research, the great work you've been doing, Peter, on this, which is absolutely fascinating, and I think what you're doing is so important. It's so important. The films you're making are so important because it opens a window into the past for a new generation today who are so accustomed to travelling through Shannon Airport, hopping on aircraft as if it's like hopping on a bus. They think absolutely nothing of it. But it opens a window into a past, and I think people should... it's important to remember the past. It's important to remember what happened before.
And the awful thing, of course, is that for, it's not just Ireland, it's globally. Every time you have an air crash, some people pay with their lives, but something more is learned. So, but it's just...
Well, I suppose it's the lessons of modern aviation. I mean, modern aviation is so safe today, unfortunately and regrettably, because of the lessons learned of those tragedies.
Exactly, safety was
lives were lost as a result. But to get back to my point, I do think it's important for maybe not just an Irish younger but a worldwide younger generation to open a window into the past and to see, precisely the kind of, the cost that aviation has paid and people have paid.
Question for you, Vincent, if you don't mind. The photographs that your dad took, that you saw as a young guy in the photo albums, do you have them today? Or
I don't. Unfortunately, with the passage of time, with various photo albums, I wish we did really. I really wish I had them. I can see them crystal clear in my mind. As a small boy growing up in the 60s and looking at those photographs, it would have meant nothing to me really. I wouldn't have known what exactly I was looking at. To me it was just really debris, rubbish in a field. I didn't really know the full story beyond what of course what my dad had said. But it seems to be the case, again, it would never happen today, that what we're looking at here, this field, it was open that night. It wasn't sealed off. In any modern crash tragedy, it would be sealed off completely for the preservation of evidence.
Exactly.
It seems to be the case there was no preservation. There was no preservation of the scene. I mean, obviously, I can understand of course, with the emergency workers and the police, their top priority that night was to help the unfortunate victims, remove the people who had deceased, and of course help people who had survived.
And
get them
there's another aspect of it that's come out in the research, Vincent, over the past year, and it's. These days we recognise PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. This is 1960 in Ireland. The airport workers were expected to go out not just the fire officers and the police, but ordinary guys, to this vision of hell being played out.
I mean, it was a vision of Dante's Inferno.
Dante's Inferno, as Arthur Quinlan described it. But there was no recognition of trauma or mental stress. These boys and girls were literally at work the next day.
I mean, post-traumatic stress disorder was unheard of, really, until relatively recent years. But one can only imagine or speculate the psychological impact that would have made on people, because literally, from your research and the research you've carried out, you're talking about removing mutilated bodies, body parts, I believe, that were found under the fuselage. So there's no question, it must have had a deep psychological effect.
Profound effect, and early on this year, one of the first interviews I had was
equally, I suppose you could say that, Peter, of the other air crashes that
100%, yeah, I was just
that you reported on as well. Yeah.
When I interviewed Pat O'Connell in connection with the President airline crash, Pat's dad was out there fairly quickly afterwards, and had come in contact with Erica Urban, the flight attendant that's referred to in the film, and he was telling me that for years afterwards, his father would often just get up from the dinner table and walk to the bedroom, close the bedroom door, just to get this cocoon of quietness, just to try to grapple with the memories, because as long as you live, you never forget that.
And I suppose we also have to, salute the good work, really the wonderful kindness of the local people living around here.
Oh yeah, 100%.
The families living around here who responded immediately from looking at, what they thought was like a bomb exploding in the fields from their windows, and then rushing out, and in some cases driving in their motor cars across this field.
Here, OD, and they were living in a house called Waverley House, which is just over the crest of that hill. So had it gone any further, the aircraft would have come into their front drive.
No doubt people had lucky escapes.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you look at for example, which I covered as a journalist, the Concorde air crash in 2000 in Paris. Again, I was on the scene of that air crash, covering it for my newspaper. But the Concorde had just narrowly missed the local village, which is the village of La Gonesse.
Yes.
And apparently the captain, who was a very accomplished, distinguished captain of that Concorde, Christian Marty, apparently his efforts in those very last seconds were to divert the Concorde away from the village. Unfortunately, he did crash, as we know, into a hotel, but luckily the hotel wasn't occupied at the time, beyond 4 staff, 4 maids, 4 workers were in the hotel. But of course, but again, to get back to our point about the Alitalia crash, in a way, I've no doubt the captain of the Alitalia Flight, in a way, some way, would have been pleased that he crashed in a field and not into a residential community.
Yeah,
which as you rightly say, he could, just fate, he could well have.
Just the way the cookie crumbles.
He could well have.
Yeah.
So people did, no doubt, people living in houses around did have a lucky escape, actually.
They did, yeah. There was one chap I interviewed, he was only a small boy at the time, and he was describing his parents taking it to the perimeter of the crash. The day after, they had been down the night of it.
The perimeter just around here?
Yeah, just before you come to the main road. And just trying to hold them back, but they were aware that something huge happened,
Yes, people were obviously.
There's with this research, all I am is just like a lightning rod, just conducting information for people. There was a chap called Jerry McMahon who was just been so good to me. And Jerry described. Jerry got me places I probably couldn't have got on my own, namely with clippings and with his background, newspaper clippings, his background in research, and even as recently as 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was one female flight attendant on the flight, a lady from Milan, Eva Lily Linder. And I just mentioned it casually to him, thinking he'll never turn up anything on this, but yet he did. It was just extraordinary. And to be able to show that photograph of Eva to Tim Finlay, who was the guard who was out here on duty that night, it was, I won't say it was overpowering, but just extraordinary that a photograph of an event like that that's burned into your brain, and all of a sudden
It is extraordinary.
you've got a photograph.
I mean, the
of
other
someone
image as well, which is very compelling, and it's a terrifying image actually, of the monk who was on board.
Yeah, that's right.
Who was literally engulfed in flames and was giving last rites to do it in the last moments of his life.
Yeah.
I gather he passed
died
away
the next day in the regional hospital, which would have been just opened at that stage. Would have been a very new hospital.
A new hospital, yeah.
Extraordinary stories.
It is. I mean, in a moment I'm going to scale that wall, and I'm going to walk that field, and it's going to be quite. For me, it will be sad, of course. One thing my dad also did, he told me before he left this field here, he did, I suppose, quite a natural thing to do, which I'm going to do myself today. He said a prayer.
Yeah.
And I think it's a mark of silent respect. It's something I will do when I walk this field shortly with you, Peter. I will say a prayer.
We'll get in there.
So it's as I said, it feels surreal to be standing, literally walking in the footsteps of my father.
I became aware of this particular crash only in the last 10 years. I did come out here several times, way before I came up with the idea of making a documentary about it. That was only a seed of an idea at the time, but the more research you do, and particularly again referring to what Jerry McMahon has given us, it's the individual stories. It's not so much the forensics of the crash. It's the real story is
the human stories.
Tragedy.
I'm quite curious, Peter, as I suspect people watching this at the moment may be curious. We're standing in the Clonlohan cemetery. Mm-hmm. Can you explain and guide me as to where exactly the flight path of that ill-fated crash, where exactly the Alitalia plane entered the graveyard here?
Mm-hmm. Well, right now, Vincent, you're actually standing on the south side of the graveyard, okay? And the aircraft was 7,000 gallons of fuel on board. It just refueled. Took off from runway 04, I believe.
Runway 04, as I point, I believe would be within a distance of less than a mile from here.
Less than 1 mile. That aircraft was only airborne.
Over these trees?
Yeah, absolutely. The airplane was airborne, I don't know, maybe 40 seconds?
Yes.
No more than that.
No, it crossed this field I'm pointing at here.
Yeah.
From the runway, it crossed the field. Now it struck the wall of the cemetery.
The left wing of the aircraft, the port wing impacted here. You're standing up, I would say, Vincent, maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 feet inside the wall. So the wingtip of the aircraft did jut in that far, okay?
Of course, there's a large wingspan.
A large wingspan.
So it struck the wall.
Yeah. There's a gable end of an ancient church behind us here. I'll put up a picture in a second. That survived intact. It didn't infringe that far in, okay?
Not that far.
But
instead it sheared the tops of a row of headstones here.
Yeah, and if you look today, if you look at it, you'll notice that these headstones in front of you, they're all relatively new. When you check the dates.
Yes, these are new. These brand new.
So it took the outside wall as well, and you can see this once you look at the old newspaper photographs of the event.
The outside wall is taken. Now the plane has sheared the tops of these headstones here at great speed.
Yeah, the plane would have been about 150 knots, okay?
So at great speed, it now plows through this wall, this far off wall of the airport, of the cemetery here.
Yeah, and it's heading on now into the next field.
And it's plowing into the next field. Mm-hmm. It carves a trail through this next field and then comes to a halt.
Yeah, that is a very long field, Vincent. It's about 3,500, 4,000 feet long.
Yeah.
It's one hell of a field. The aircraft barrels up there on the ridge. You can see the little ridge. Beyond that ridge, where the cows are standing today, it starts to dip, and it dips down. There's a modern day forest on the right hand side. The tail unit separated from the aircraft, and in fact was probably the only large recognizable piece left over. The tail unit slid, to the best of my knowledge, to the right. The flight attendant Eva Lily Linder was found in that, and human remains beneath it, so it's all very, very graphic, very grim. The bulk of the wreckage, wings, undercarriage, the bulk of the fuselage continues on over the ridge, barrels down the ridge and explodes at a fence, a ditch at the far end of that, a boundary. And it was there that that was the end of the story for those 34 passengers on the night and crew.
Well, let's go across that wall. And
let's try anyway.
Let's take a walk in that field.
Yeah, you're a brave man, because I'm hoping there's no bulls there. I see some cows, but hopefully there's no bulls.
I think I'm in good hands.
Okay, let's try that, Vincent. Okay.